Hey guys, thanks Dave, and thanks for having me here. I'm very happy to tell you lots about the trials and tribulations of trying to start a company here in Ireland. So what I was going to do is, as Dave said, I'll tell you a little bit about what we do, just give you a little bit of context of what we do and why we did it. And then I think the interesting bit for me, certainly the emotional bit for me, was the journey from leaving a secure, well-paid job that provided for my family and jumping into a new enterprise funded, part funded by myself initially, and the journey up and down and up and down and up and down that we've had over the last couple of years. So what we do is we do big data for travel. So what that really means is we help airlines and travel companies use customer data more effectively throughout their organization, primarily to do two things. One, to create more relevant customer experiences, but two, to increase transactional revenue, so help them sell more products each time a customer goes to their website, goes into the travel agency, or interacts with the airline in the contact center. I guess that's, at a very high level, that's what we set out to do. And the challenge is that most of these companies are tremendously bad at using that kind of data that they have in their organizations. You think that you go to Aer Lingus or Ryanair or these, I don't mean to dump on those guys, because they're just kind of the same as most other organizations in the travel industry, in that they have all this data. You guys fly with them all the time, you give them passport numbers, you give them all your travel history, when you check in you give them lots of personal information about you. They know who you've traveled with, they know how often you travel, they know how much you spend. But the interesting thing is, despite what you'll see on the internet about Ryanair changing flights based on cookies, and there's all sorts of urban myths out there, all these companies take that data, they put it in a database or a system inside their organization, and almost all of them never look at it again. So they have all this rich information about who you are, you the customer, but no one leverages that information to maybe say that this guy would prefer a certain type of hotel with his flight, or this person would prefer to buy a flight at this price and not this price, or this person would really respond well to me if I really respond well to this company if I gave him an extended legroom seat for free this time, because I know in the long run he's going to be worth a lot of money to me, my company. So it's really interesting, because they don't really know much. They have all this data, but they don't know much about you, and that's really the challenge that we set out to solve. So the backdrop to, sorry, I don't know why this isn't working, but the backdrop to all this is that we talk about big data, and what is big data. So there's a lot of noise and hype and stuff out there about what this technology or this sphere or this vertical really means. But there's a couple of inescapable facts: that data quantities and data volumes are growing at a tremendous rate globally, day on day on day. The stats here, some interesting ones here, is that there's 60% growth in data volumes annually, year on year. So in 2 years' time, there'll be more data in the world than ever existed today, from the point of time data started to today. So things are growing really, really quickly. And I guess the stat I like is that 5 exabytes are created every 2 days. Now, an exabyte's a nebulous thing, but maybe some of you guys are scientists, so have some kind of some idea what that really means. But just to put that in context for some of the non-technical users, like the US Library of Congress contains 19 million books. 5 exabytes in information entropy broadly equates to 500 million US Libraries of Congress, and we're creating that amount of information and data every 2 days. So this is happening out there all the time, and it's the backdrop to what these retailers online, or Google, or advertisers, all these guys online, is the backdrop to how they operate. And the companies that can gain a step or gain a lead and being able to, one, gather that data, and two, analyze and act on that data, it's offering huge, tremendous competitive advantage to them. And the interesting subtext to this is that most of this data is unstructured. So it's you guys posting valuable or invaluable content on Facebook or Twitter. It's you guys sending emails. It's people making phone calls. It's video content. All that information is growing. It's available, but largely untapped. I guess the second part to it, and when we set out to do this, we were trying to solve this big problem where we could help companies use all this new data that's being generated, help them use it more effectively. But the reality was, as we were talking to CMOs and CIOs in relatively large organizations in airlines and travel companies, is that that they were saying to me that, like, hey, that's great, you can go take all this data from the interweb and internet and use all this information, but what I've got a database of information here I've never looked at before. I take bookings from all my customers, I stick them in a database and I don't use them. I've got customers who are online, but I don't know what their online activity is based on their emails that I send to them. And they have these, what we would think, relatively simple problems, in that there's a database of email user or of email sign-ins, people who want to receive emails from the company. There's people who interact on the website. There's people who've transacted with you, who've actually given their credit card and purchased. And they can't connect the dots between those relatively simple things. Now, the reality is, in a big enterprise, that's a challenging thing to do. But some of the stats, when we, this is borne out by some Gartner or one of those Gartner Monitor, one of those big companies that do these types of surveys, is that most of these guys, most of these CMOs all face the same challenges. They can't connect the dots between the customer data that they have in their own organization, let alone the big data that they have externally to the organization. And I guess it was been part of this thing, or the evolution of being in a young company and understanding how to get to market and get your idea into a technology, what we have, and then get it out to market to convince somebody to buy it, is that you got to be able to understand and listen to what people are telling you, and then be able to shape your proposition or shape what you're saying so that you become more compelling each time you speak to the next customer. And this is what we were learning. We were a bunch of maths and stats guys trying to do this, but launch rockets. But the reality is these guys, most of these guys wanted a car. And we had to really adjust our business and our business model to accept the fact that some of the stuff we were doing today may not be rocket science, it may be fundamentals, but without those fundamentals, we could never get to do the sophisticated targeting and big data analysis that we wanted to do. So it was really about understanding that we're not about big data or little data, it's really about customer data, and we don't really care whether it's large quantities of unstructured, hard, noisy customer data, or whether it's quite structured coming from a database internally in the organization. It doesn't matter to us. We want to take that data, make it useful, and help the companies use that more effectively. Where we came from is probably the interesting thing from, and it's my journey personally. So I have always worked, so I graduated from Trinity. I did maths in Trinity at the 1998, I think it was, I finished, and then I went on to do a master's in computer science. So I did maths. I think it was an ill-fated, it was the wrong subject for me. I'm more of an applied maths kind of engineer type, and typical kind of bullheadedness, I stuck out the maths course in Trinity, did okay, but really when I got into computer science, I understood that that's really what I like. I like building things, making things, and applying kind of logical thinking to solving puzzles. And that's really how, and it's some of the thinking that that kind of thinking and approach is how I've kind of applied the same logic to be able to start and grow Boxever. But my background, so I started work in the start of 2000, and I ended up in a very young startup called Cape Technologies, and they were doing mobile telco analytics. We sold software to some of the big mobile telco operators here in Europe. At the end, we had Vodafone Group, Telefonica, which was O2, and we had some big operators in South America. And what we did was we analyzed how all the calls in the network. So if you picked up your phone, your mobile phone, made a call, we made sure that you got billed for it, essentially, revenue integrity. And we analyzed all that data to do lots of things, but at the end we were starting to look at marketing analytics. So churn analysis, for some of you guys maybe are in this area, like churn analysis. So if you're calling lots of people off network, does that mean you're going to leave the network because you got a better deal off the network? And looking at when people are most likely to leave, why they're going to leave, or can we give somebody a top up based on their spending habits that will make them spend a little bit more? So we were doing some interesting things there, but we exited in 2007. So we sold to a Portuguese company in 2007. It wasn't my startup. I was one of the first engineers, so I got exposed to a lot of great things from, talking to customers, sweeping the floor, keeping the servers up, and ultimately building a lot of software. But it was fascinating that in that, I think I've always been involved in small companies, small chaotic companies, and I was about to get married in 2008, and I got an offer from a company called Datalex. So Datalex is a much more established company. They asked me to come in and run their engineering department, and it was, a really exciting offer, but I quickly realized that much more established, I was coming in to fulfill a process in a fairly mature organization, and within 2 years I just knew that it wasn't for me. So that's kind of the backdrop of me personally, why I'm here. I'm a software engineer by trade, converted to CEO, founder, and kind of trying to learn as much as I can on the go. But in November 2010, so we had our first girl, we just had our second child, and this is a picture of me. But November 2010 was when I actually quit my job. so I quit Datalex. I had no means to pay any bills. I had no means to meet my salary. I knew I had a runway of a certain amount, which was kind of May, June was probably. So I knew, and I thought foolishly that I'd have the company up, funded, maybe exited in the 9 months, you know. So I jumped out and I started doing this. But to be honest, I had an idea. I knew that based on my experience in Datalex that I saw all these big companies and they struggled with data, and I had a lot of experience in data from previous companies. So I kind of knew this was something to do. I tried to make it happen in Datalex, couldn't make it happen for lots of organizational reasons in that company, so I started myself. November 2010, this is my personal situation. This is my kind of headspace. So I sent this text to my wife the day I started. I started in DCU Invent, so it's like an incubation center, kind of like the one here. It's Nova here, isn't it? So kind of like the Nova one here. And I was on my own in this massive room, probably this size. They said they were going to fill it with entrepreneurs, but actually it was just me on my own on a desk in the corner. And I was in this desk and I was like, what have I done? You know, what am I doing here? And I wrote this smiley face. I had a typical kind of new guy, pen, pad of paper, you know, I'm ready. And I wrote this and texted it to my wife. We actually got it framed at home now. It's on the wall because it was kind of just a little testament to like sometimes you can think it. And to be honest, I'd done a lot of different like courses, like Start Your Own Business course, and lots of different things that had kind of told you all the theory about how to do it. But ultimately it came down to a kind of irrational decision. It was totally irrational. I shouldn't have done it. It was we just had our second child. We hadn't really got that much money, and we didn't really know how I hadn't got a clear plan of, okay, I'm going to do all this. So I hadn't even got a team. I was on my own. So I think, you know, the first thing to take away is that there's never a good time to do this, you know. You're probably better off doing it while you're young, you know, so many commitments, but there's never really a good time. But you kind of counter that with the fact that as you get a bit older or you have more experience, you probably can apply that experience in a much more focused manner. So, you know, but as you get older and gain more experience, one, you kind of get used to the fact that you're having a salary. You might have other commitments like family or mortgage. So things kind of, there's always a reason to say no, always. And I think the challenge for many people, and a lot of people that I would have thought, as I started out my journey, there was people I'd identified as people who might come working with me, but it was clear that their appetite for risk wasn't quite the same as mine. And it's something that's kind of stayed with me throughout the nearly 2 years we've been at this, or over 2 years we've been at this, is that certain people are just they like the idea of it. You know, they might do a part-time at night, but when it comes down to commitment, actually putting skin in the game, it's a different proposition. So I guess, and the other kind of data point behind this is when I met Dave. So one of the reasons I'd actually quit in November 2011 was that we'd been accepted. I'd applied to another kind of entrepreneur course with Enterprise Ireland, and they brought us into this kind of 6-month like incubation course where we met once every month and we did some stuff, and it was really cool. But you know, another interesting data point, I actually just forgot about this, was that when I got onto that course, I had this idea to do a B2C social gambling, so bet with friends. And that was actually the pitch I put to Enterprise Ireland. Enterprise Ireland accepted that, and that was what got me thinking, God, I could start this company. But within 2 months I figured out I could never ever make money from that, you know. So by November I'd started to change my idea and change it to something that leveraged my previous experience. So things kind of went on and evolved, and like I guess this was kind of March, so I was like 5 months in, the clock's ticking financially for me personally. This is Carlos and Barry. I don't know where they are now, but this was the team then. So I'd kind of convinced 2 guys to leave me. This was the corner, and there was 3 of us in the room now, not one. And so things I felt were on the up. And again, this is another point around having a company in that, or in a startup, you know, there's lots of false summits, you know. You just think, God, at that point I was thinking, right, I've got a team. We were looking for office space. We were kind of had some customer interactions, and it felt like things were moving, and things were really moving. And then, like, very quickly, Barry got a real job that paid him, and Carlos just disappeared. I don't know where he's gone. So, those two guys, and by June, it was clear that things had taken a real dip, and I was in a kind of bad place emotionally, because at that point, I kind of brought this idea. I'd kind of fleshed it out. I felt like there was something there. I'd built some technology. I'd brought some people in, and then gradually things started to fall off. The interested customers, I think it was Paddy Power and Magnet were at the time. So it wasn't just Airlines, it was helping all those companies use customer data. They fell away. The team, the guys had left to take jobs that actually paid them. And I was kind of on my own. So I was sitting on my own in DCU going, like, is this it? Is it done? And we finished. That's 2011. Was it done? And I was kind of going, I remember vividly, I was wearing shorts. It was a really warm day, unseasonably for Ireland. And I got an offer of a job. I got an interview offer in Citibank to be their VP of Innovation. So they have a huge big innovation lab down in the Keys here in Dublin. I did 2 interviews, and I was going back in to meet him to knock out the contract. So I got the job. And I remember I went home, took off my shorts, put on my suit, went into Citibank. I was just going, like, is this it? That was like June, July. And I was going, like, it was a tremendously well-paid job. Everything looked really rosy. But based on where my head came from, I was just like, I wasn't ready. So I think the second kind of point I take away from this is, even though I was in a tremendously bad place, mentally, I just felt that I had to push through this and I had to make it. And I think the second part is, like, it's about commitment, and there's a stubbornness you need to do this, And I'd always balance that stubbornness with the fact that you have to have common sense. And I think many entrepreneurs need more stubbornness and an ability to just keep going sometimes, rather than listen to what all the signals say. I'm not getting paid, nobody's listening to me, I have no customers. And I think it got to a point where I remember I rang Dave about, these guys were on another incubation thing down in Digital Hub, and they were on the program before me. And I just put in an application. I'd fabricated 2 names. You have to have a team of 3. I fabricated 2 names on the application. They accepted me into the application, and what was going to happen, they'd give you 20,000 euros for a period of 3 months to help you bring your idea to market. So, and there was a whole host of questions about equity and things like that. And I remember ringing Dave, and I was like, will I just take the job in Citibank, or what do you think of this course, this program that those guys were on? And it was Dave that kind of convinced me to just stay the course, roll the dice one more time. So it was actually there things just started to improve. So I owned the whole company. It was me 100% of the company. If it all exited, I was going to be 100% rich. But actually, the reality is you need people around you that can support you. Like, it's impossible to do this, absolutely and utterly impossible to do this on your own. So Dermot and Alan are 2 guys that worked with me in Datalex. I brought them in, I gave them significant portion of the company to work with me. So we're all fully vested founders with proper equity stakes in a young company. The program that we were on, called Launchpad, we went through that program, it went okay. I think we helped. The key thing out of that program was that I got 2 other guys around me, and things started to feel like we were back on the move. And it was from there things kicked off. So at the end of the program, we had a term sheet from one of the investors and an angel investment group called Bloom Equity in Dublin. So all of a sudden, we could see there was going to be some legs or some life in this. Now, it wasn't very big, but at the end, that was December 2011. By February 2012, we had 5 term sheets from 5 different proper VCs here in Dublin. So it was ACT, Delta Partners. We had a term sheet from a South African investment company, and we had a couple of term sheets from Bloom and some other angel investors. So things had and we still didn't have a customer, but what we had was a team, we had an idea, we had some technology, and we had a belief that we could execute on all those. And really, when things started to come together by May 2012, we were in the money. But really, that's a complete farcical view of how raising money is. I was, head in hands. Is this ever going to happen? Because the backdrop to that was that I had to get my dad to pay my mortgage at my age for 4 months coming up to that, because I was completely flattened. I was done personally. I'd spent everything I had to try bring the project to this point, But I knew once I got Delta and ACT involved that we had commitment of money, and I was going to be able to, for the first time in a year and a half, actually pay myself a salary. So, you know, it was a tremendous feeling, and it was a real milestone to get proper venture capital company, Delta Partners, to back us for over $1 million, 800,000 euros. So it was a huge milestone in the evolution of Boxever, because on the back of that, it was real validation from you know, sophisticated investors that this product is going to deliver real value to customers. And then it was really about just moving through gears from that point and trying to hit milestones. You know, so by July, August, we had our first customer, Atlantic Airways in the Faroe Islands. Tiny little company, but again, customer validation, and these are all little milestones. By October 2012, we actually launched. Like, we were featured in the Wall Street Journal, some of the technical tech publications like VentureBeat and The Next Web. T-News is a big travel journal, and we got all this publicity that and we didn't really chase it. And all the time, you could feel things starting to ratchet up, you know. And from that point of view, it was at this point then we hired our first graduate engineer in July. We went from 3 to 4. We had a couple of missteps with hiring different people over the next few months, but we hired another 3 people around this time, and now we're 11, soon to be 15 actually. But the game again for a startup is you know, what do you want from a startup? And certainly when you bring on institutional investors, it changes the discussion. You know, they don't want to fund a startup to get to a point where, you know, you can get 10 people, you can pay the bills for 10 people. They want to see the startup go through the gears. Can they do 1 million this year? Can you do 5 million in 2 years? Can they do 10, 50, 100? And that's why they back companies. They want to take risks on lots of high potential companies. They don't want to back companies that can be established businesses, established kind of not uninteresting but slow growth businesses. And this is something you guys will have to ask yourself when you want to start a company. So, like, if you want to start a company, do I want to grow the company to 1 million or 50 million or 100 million? That certainly was always my ambition. I want to have a large company going after, you know, huge, ambitious global contracts, and have a really, you know, I think we can be a substantial, meaningful Irish company here, and that's what we're trying to achieve, and that's the vision I brought my investors on. But that's not for everybody, and that's really important, because, you know, lots of people would like to have a business that can support them, their family, and maybe some of their co-founders. And these are key decisions you'll have to make along your journey of starting the company. Sometimes, you know, it might seem that, and a lot of people, when you get into the startup ecosystem here, a lot of people push you towards, you know, you got to get funding, you got to get investors. I would say what you got to get is you got to get customers. You know, you get some customers on board, everything else will fall behind it. You know, whether you're selling some, you know, some bioscience product, you're selling some technology, you're selling oranges. If you can sell your product and do that without any external financial assistance, then you're in a great place. And then you can decide on your own terms whether you want to be, you know, a huge global company, or you want to be a meaningful local company that can sustain and support a number of people working reasonable hours to do something really interesting. And they're very different things. And you know, certainly I've kind of flip-flopped between what Boxever could be over the years. But, you know, I'm kind of ambitious and competitive, and I think those things kind of reflect itself in how the company is structured. In terms of the team, I think I mentioned it's me, Alan, and Dermot are the co-founders. So relatively inexperienced in terms of commercial now. So I would say, you know, we've no sales experience. I've got the most sales experience. I'm a techie. Dermot and Alan are absolute techies. So we can build a product, but part of the journey was understanding how can we sell the product. And we've been working really hard to solve some of those challenges over the last year and a half. And I think we're getting there now. And some other validation, you know, Henrietta is a senior executive from the airline industry, and she was helping us really understand how can we take a technical product and sell it in the way that airline guys can speak, you know, and that's really important. Understanding you're not selling a technical product, you're selling benefits to a guy who's sitting across the table. And ultimately, we're not selling even benefits. You know, when you're selling to somebody, you're selling them the opportunity for them to move up in their organization. It really comes down, time and time again, I could almost picture the guy we sell to in an airline or travel company. They're, you know, somewhere between 30 and 40, young family. This guy is very intelligent, tech savvy, and hyper ambitious. And he backs Boxever because he knows that he can use us as leverage in the organization to move up within the organization. And that's sales, you know, something I've learned is always down to relationships and helping the other person across the table understand that, you know, you're the kingmaker. You're trying to help him move up in the organization. And so these are kind of things that we've learned over the last while. I don't think we've solved them, but certainly we've learned, you know. In terms of our company, there's 11 of us now. We were in Dogpatch Labs on Barrow Street. It's a co-working space. Really cool place. There's about 10 or 15 companies in there, all working on different ideas from music to data and everything in between. And I guess we just moved out of there into our own office. So that, you know, 2 weeks ago, we took our own office in the IFSC. Another big milestone. You know, we have our own door, everything. You know, it's really strange that like it's taken this long to do it. When you open the door, like there's all these people in there that are working and are sitting there because you can afford to pay them, and you're creating something. So tremendous experience and tremendous feeling. And all these things are small little milestones on the way, but you know, not to say tomorrow all these customers will leave us and I'll be in a really bad place again. Like it really is. You know, I think somebody had a quote that being in a startup is a series of really demoralizing knockbacks, you know, interrupted by the odd piece of good news. You know, and that's kind of what it feels like sometimes. You know, you're kind of slogging. You get a piece of good news, great, but then it's straight back to the slog again. You know, and that's a really kind of quick introduction to my company and I guess my journey. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.